This video is sponsored by G-Portal. Stick around to the end for more on that. Hi everyone, this is the kind of after party, a week or two later after Aberration Part 2. I want to talk to you a little bit about, how Part 2 went, Part 3 status and what's going on with that, and just kind of summing up the Survival Stories project and what's been going on, what I have planned for the future, and all that kind of stuff. So, first of all, thank you so much for all the support on Part 2. Really appreciate it. The amount of comments that are just so incredibly, I cannot imagine comments being nicer than that. So thank you guys. You can sort of see the amount of work that the team and I put into each of these parts, and we put more and more stuff into them each time, it feels like, at least because we're able to carry over these skills and get better and better. But thank you for knowing and recognizing and seeing that, and I'm glad it's something that you like. For me, it was a cool video to watch, and that's sort of the goal, is make a video that is enjoyable, and that bar just keeps getting higher and higher, because there's always things that are gonna make it even better and better. And so yeah, it was a lot of fun, and we only have one part left for Aberration. And speaking of which, that part 3, what's going on? So I know some of you, if you saw the ending, you've seen the Part 3 finale, the little teaser with the graduate student backpack. So Part 3 is actually going tremendously fast. Out of the gate, I was just rapid fire getting everything planned out in the timeline and everything ready. And already in just today, in just a few hours, I've already established a ton of the screenplay and getting ready to storyboard one of the biggest, pretty much the biggest sequence, or the most complex sequence that we've ever done before. So Part 3 is going to have an incredible fight scene that is just dude, I can't even, it's so much more than anything we've done so far. Before I continue the video, I need to really briefly mention G-Portal, which is a really cool server provider that offers 10% off their servers with the affiliate code in the description. So go ahead and use that if you're looking for your own servers. Otherwise, let's get back to the video. So just, yeah, be ready for that, I guess. I don't know if anyone's gonna be ready for it, because I'm envisioning it being so cool, especially with who I'm going to be working with on the music this time around. We're getting a pretty cool music producer who's going to be collaborating with us. So yeah, can't wait, and stay tuned as for whenever it comes out. You're probably wondering that. We're aiming for the summer. Part 2, so Part 1 took 7 or 8 months. Part 2 took 4 months, and I'd aim for about 3 months. At most, I think it'll be 4 months, but much closer to 3. We want to really wrap this up pretty quickly, and especially because it's shorter. There's not as much work involved. The total video, in fact, is 40 minutes long. So there you go, and the length of Part 3. It's 40 minutes long compared to Part 1 and 2, which were each 50, and really that 40 minutes can be closer to 37, 36, because Part 3 has a pretty lengthy and intentional and important ending, cinematic type thing. So it's shorter, and it shouldn't take as long because of that. Again, there are still very complex scenes that we're working on, but nonetheless, because we have the right people to do that, and because I'm just able to pay people more and get more people involved, I think we can move through much faster than even with Part 2. Within 3 months, that's what we're aiming for. Hopefully it'll be even less, but it's going to take time, even though it's shorter, and a lot of it doesn't necessarily have heavy mod content. There is that huge sequence. And so, yeah, we'll be working hard and making something that we're really proud of. As for Extinction and everything with that, before I talk about the future, I kind of want to just briefly sum up the Survival Stories as a project. This is something that, not everyone has been watching since I was producing The Island and Scorched Earth, but just to give you some perspective as to what this project has, how it's changed, which is really important. if you look at the island, you can see all these, you can see both the individual character videos as well as the complete ones that I did later on to sort of have the notes in chronological order. The production value there was just so much lower, and so much more crude, I guess. If you look at the island, you'll just see, maybe not everyone will notice, but it's just that, there's no still shots, the camera's always moving, it's always curving around and panning, and no real like artistic direction with how the camera or the cinematography was in any of the island videos, just about, except for maybe Nerva's, because I do remember starting to get a little bit more creative with Nerva's video. And so, really, the survival stories started out very much as like a nerdy technical project that was just like, okay, I don't know how to do any of this. Like, I've never put someone else's voiceover over some gameplay and tried to match this and that, but beyond my own, very crudely, right? And so I was just like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I want to put the voiceover, I want to have people voice the Explorer notes in the game, because at that point, 2020, no one had ever done that, right? Beyond, random ARK players uploading videos of themselves just reading the notes. And so, I wanted to tell the story in some way, and I wasn't just happy with, paying someone to voice the notes. I needed something to put under it. And at first, that gameplay, what you saw in the earlier survival stories was just random crap. Like, it was just like B-roll, the most B-roll of B-roll. Just basic narration, basic footage to go under the narration and make it kind of make sense. Whether that was random shots of the island while Helena was talking about the island or something else, Sometimes it was just so random, Helena and Rockwell standing next to each other. I don't think I realized it at the time, but there was something inside me that was really crying to like go further than this, to like be more artistic. But I didn't know how, and it took a long time to learn how to do that. And so, with Nerva, like I said, it got there's maybe one or two shots that were a little bit more artistic or sort of more deliberate and designed deliberately, like in some way that's beyond just the camera, just like floating around, this sort of crude scene that was supposed to reenact what was happening in the notes. So then with Scorched Earth, we have John Dakea and Raya, and then later Rockwell and Helena. And Scorched Earth was when I realized that there were some issues with what I was doing. I just wasn't very happy with the way that I was making the survival stories, at least near the end. Production value went up a little bit for Scorched Earth. I started paying a modder or two to start making some stuff. For example, we had to rebuild Nosti from the ground up with player-made structures so that we could then, crumble it and destroy it and everything. That itself was very crude. There are so many better ways I would do that now, looking back, but that's how it goes. That's how you learn. You start out very sort of naive and just, you don't know how to do things and you're bad at them, and that's just how it goes. So, with Scorched Earth, it was a little bit better. And there was this key point that I started experimenting a little bit with I don't know what I would call it, but sort of splicing in natural sounds and music in between voiceover. And this was actually, if anyone's seen the John Dakea video, this is when, so that part where John and the gang go into the Mantis nest to go blow it up. There's just this point where it's just sort of a musical montage. It's just a little montage of them traveling with just some like Gen 2 or Gen 1 music under it, I think.
Shooting them one by one won't do the trick. I'm glad I decided to take Sasha with me.
And that might not seem that special, but that was actually really the first time when I started to sort of try and be a little bit more deliberate and artistic, rather than just having these scenes that had like always present camera that had no rhyme or reason to it. And so, then we got into the next videos and Helena and Rockwell. And at that point, when we were doing Helena and Rockwell, I really wanted to stop moving the camera. It was killing me. Because I was getting really self-conscious and annoyed about how the camera was always moving, and it was starting to make me kind of sick, like not sort of akin to, I guess, being like dizzy. It is just a little too much, too stimulating to have the camera moving all the time. And I do have ADHD, and so that's why it was easy to do that. But even after that, even after producing making so many of these and having that be sort of my style, I was getting a little sick of it. But I knew that for Scorched Earth, I didn't want to just start introducing still shots, because it felt like I would break sort of some kind of stylistic continuity that I had already set up for their, the previous Scorched Earth videos. So it continued in that style, and that meant that I just wasn't very, by the end of Scorched Earth, I was not very happy nor confident in my abilities to make something that was more like a film instead of this sort of weird narration thing with the floating camera that doesn't really have a particular, reason to be in one particular place compared to how it is now, where we're very careful, and I have a tremendous amount of planning that goes into every shot, and so with Aberration, at the end of Scorched Earth, I was like, all right, I'm done. I'm not even going to try I'm not even going to try to get better. I'm not really that happy with how the survival stories have gone. The quality is just not as high as I think it should be. And so, then for Aberration, I was pretty much, it only took one night to go, okay, well, I talked with the team and they were like, yeah, we should do Aberration. And I was like, okay, yeah, you're right. Because I wanted to, and also they were like, why don't you just raise money, if you're worried about money. And so I did, and I set up a GoFundMe, and that ended up reaching its goal very quickly. And the goal was actually increased recently for part 2. I'm not going to be touching that GoFundMe going forward. We have the funding for part 3. But I was just like, all right, let's get it. I'm going to take my time and increase the quality. And man, it took a long time to figure out how to increase the quality and how to get better. And a lot of side projects, a lot of other videos that I produced during the development of Aberration, of the survival stories, with part 1, and part 2 to a degree, especially with different classes I took that taught different film principles with framing and just a lot of stuff I learned in school with real cameras, and having to do a lot of projects with physical cameras ended up contributing to my sense of what looks good in the game with in-game cameras. And so, that ended up shaping part 1 to a degree. It sort of started off in that same style. If you look back at part 1 with some of Diana's early notes, you'll notice it still might kind of feel, with like the field of view and the amount of time that the camera is moving, it might still kind of feel like Scorched Earth a little bit. But then, sort of the filming for part 1 was broken up largely. It was sort of split, and so later on we got a little bit better, and I started slowing down and was like, okay, let me apply these real principles that I'm learning and techniques into the film, and then it made a huge difference, at least to me. And so, then we finished part 1, and it was just a tremendous weight lifted off my chest. 7 to 8 month project, just done. Seeing them in this like self-contained thing where each part is its own thing, it was done. And then it was time to make Rockwell and Helena's. And early on, now to do with the parts thing, let me just briefly describe that. So what happened with Aberration, because I really want to highlight the progression of the survival stories and how they've changed pretty significantly beyond just these different film, cinematography stuff and techniques. The actual format of the videos has changed pretty drastically, and in a good way. It's been going in a good direction, and that's going to impact the future if we continue past aberration. So, early on with Island and Scorched Earth, it was these just the videos was it was a video for each character, basically, right? You had the Helena, Rockwell, Edmund, or Nerva, Mei-Yin videos. And with Scorched Earth, I started realizing this, among the tons of cinematography stuff, this is maybe a little bit inefficient, or I'd like to change this and not do this. And so, I was like, okay, what if we put John and Raya in the same video? How would that work? And I decided against it because, again, it was the same thing with having still shots. I didn't want to change the format halfway or partway into the project, because we were already a couple months into Scorched at that point. But then with Aberration, we were able to, it was a new map, so we could really change things up a little bit. And early on, I kind of forgot about that, and I was like, okay, I guess we're going to do each character. And then I was like, wait a second. Some of this just kind of doesn't make sense, and it would make more sense to tell the story chronologically. And and that's around the time when I made the complete survival stories, to really leading up to the release of part 1, to sort of catch them up a little bit to the quality, or have people remember the survival stories to agree. And they were pretty successful. A lot of people have seen the complete ones compared to the actual per character videos. And then, around that time, we were deciding, okay, well, we should break this into parts. So part 1 would cover Mei-Yin and Diana and Mei-Yin's story, the whole destruction of aberration, and then, how Mei-Yin eventually lands on the Ark after it's destroyed, and she meets Diana and everything and integrates into the group. And then they do their thing, and at the end of part 1, that is where there's essentially a big block of nothing in between those notes and Helena and Rockwell. So it was a good point to stop. That was a good place to end that video and have part 1 be very contained and have its own thing going for it. And then part 2 would cover, Helena and Rockwell leading up to what we also decided would then be part 3. And so, part 2 covers Helena 1 through maybe 25, 26, and Rockwell 1 through, I think, 27. And so that was a good point to stop it there, because if you've seen part 2, you know what happens at the end. And from there, it's just rise. But with part 3 is going to start with the graduate students. It's going to start decades in the future. For those of you who have read them, then you probably know why that is. But if you haven't read the graduate students' notes, hopefully you like our interpretation. I'm really excited. We've got all the voice actors solidified, and they sound really awesome. So we go through the story of all the graduate students, and then we get back to where part 2 ended off and finish up the story. And, splitting up Aberration, which is like 12 different Explorer Note characters, right? 12 different characters. If I think maybe it's 13, somewhere around there. Splitting it up between 3 parts and focusing on this chronological order as opposed to previous maps was such a good change, and it was so needed for raising the quality. And, moving forward in the future, if we do Extinction, which I'm not as annoyed by now, because, there's a couple things I want to that were brought up that I want to go over. So, I do want to give closure to all of you who have been watching the survival stories. I want to give closure to myself, because it does feel a little wrong, or a little just like, come on, dude, to end Aberration, or to end the survival stories with Aberration, when there is truly a map that ends this part of the story, the legacy story. There's 4 maps that really tell this whole story with these characters, and then Genesis and Gen 1 and Gen 2 are their own thing that really don't mess with this part of the story. So I have interest in doing it, but there's a couple conditions. So first of all, there's the UE5 Unreal Engine 5 update issue. We don't know when that update's coming out. You've undoubtedly heard about it if you're watching this video. If you're that interested in survival stories, you've probably heard about this UE5 thing. Jeremy Stieglitz has posted about it. Wildcard are going to be upgrading the engine for ARK to UE5 from a much older version of UE4, way older than the current latest version. And what this could mean is that it'll very likely break all the mods, and mods will have to be remade. This might not be all that difficult, but they certainly will not just work fine. And the issue with that is that, you know, if we meet other conditions, which I'll talk about, I don't want to then put a bunch of resources and time into developing Extinction content only for the UE5 update to break it. So part of it is, okay, I think in order to do Extinction, we need to wait until this UE5 update is actually shown to us. Either explained so that we know how the mods are going to be able to carry over, or given to us and we straight up get the update. Either of those conditions are very much necessary in order to do Extinction. Second, we need to gauge the interest with funding. So it's something that I would want to raise a lot of money for in order to pay everyone who would get involved. We'd probably look for some even more people than who we've been working with. And you know, this would mean that we could go so much faster. The speed, all the skills that were developed during Aberration, not just for me, but for anyone else who's on the team and who would work on Extinction, who would want to work on Extinction, those skills would massively speed up production. And we really know what the priorities are now compared to way back in earlier stages, way back when we originally raised money for Aberration Part 1 and onward. And so we'd have to gauge interest with funding. If it couldn't get the funding, I just wouldn't do it because it just wouldn't be worth it to me. It wouldn't be worth it for the team. And so that's the other condition. Also, one more. The Extinction survival stories would be one video. It would be one film, one movie, and it would probably be about 2 hours long or however long it takes, because I think there's 120 Explorer notes, so there's a lot. Alternatively, it could be in a completely different format that doesn't use the Explorer notes necessarily. It doesn't put them on the screen, more film-like, but that's not. This project, like I was talking about, started as a nerdy technical thing to just be like, technically, these are the Explorer note. This is every single Explorer note. This is exactly all the words that were said in it, and this is some random footage to go under it, right? But it's obviously shifted from that to, technically, these are the notes. Look, someone's reading it. But also, including having the footage be just as important and really complementing the narration as opposed to just being, what goes under it. And so having these two things there is very much important to me still. And I do feel like we've sort of hit a wall with that method of storytelling. But it's not a wall that I'm at all frustrated by like I was with Scorched Earth, because it genuinely works, at least according to you guys. I think you really, based on the comments, it seems like you guys really liked Part 2, and that is the sort of style that I would go with moving forward, and the style that I would feel happy to go with. But like I said, yeah, Extinction would be one video, and that's that. It would be just the whole entire map story. With all these characters, their time on the map. Extinction's a lot. A lot of it, I think, is big sort of desert area. We'd have to build a lot of map content and, of course, a lot of mod content. Lots of different armor pieces. It's pretty similar to Aberration. There's a whole lot of mech stuff. There's a bunch of Titans. There's a whole lot. But, if we can raise the money, if we can figure out what's going on with this UE5 thing, and if we are able to do it in the same way that we have been with Aberration, which I'm very confident we can, that kind of thing doesn't really fall off. You just improve and improve. If you're putting in the right effort and you're still enthusiastic to do it, then it will happen. But again, conditions, and I hope you can all understand that. I'm not going to make any kind of GoFundMe at this point right now, especially considering part 3 for Aberration isn't even out yet, but it's just something to think about, and I will be thinking about it moving forward. And so yeah, stay tuned for part 3, everyone. This has been a very long video. Thank you for watching if you made it this far, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye, everyone.